Welcome to another episode of Growth Hacker TV. I'm Rawson Taylor, and today I have Brennan Dunn with us. Brennan, thanks so much for coming on the program.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. You're a guy I've been wanting to have on for a long time. Anybody that's online has probably seen your name pop up a time or two as they browse around. I think you do a great job at content marketing, and you do a great job of personal branding. And I think also it's because you provide a real service, and people seem to get a lot of value out of the stuff you've been doing online. And so I think that's one of the reasons your name keeps coming up. But for people that don't know, let me just tell them a little bit about you. You've created what I call an empire helping freelancers. You have a course on how to double your freelancing rates. And it's wildly successful. It pops up everywhere. Everyone talks about it. You also created a SaaS product called PlanScope, which helped agencies with project management. And so you're in deep on the freelancer, small agency kind of world. You seem to be the man kind of at the center of it. Does all that sound about right?
Sounds good to me.
Cool. Well, let's start with this. How did you get into the freelancing space originally? Because I looked at your LinkedIn profile, and it didn't seem like that you had this life destined for jumping into freelance world, and yet somehow you became the guy at the center of it, helping them out. Well, what happened there? How'd that happen?
Yeah, so back around 2006 is when I started freelancing, and then within a year I kind of got tired of the one-man operation and wanted to scale. So I started an agency, or I transitioned into an agency, and over the next few years I grew the team to 11, and it was kind of like, at that point I didn't know anything about business at all. I just knew how to write code. And that's, I thought everyone hired me because of my code writing abilities and everything else. And what was interesting was, as I grew the team, well, first off, we got to the point where we had a 6-figure a month salary that I had to pay. So randomly hoping for referrals wasn't cutting it anymore. So I had to learn how to properly market and sell the team. And I also had to just learn a lot about why did clients buy, why didn't they buy. I had to really optimize for increasing proposal conversion rates, and I had to do a lot. So I studied everything I could. I learned everything I could. I joined a bunch of, I hired a business coach. I joined a lot of, groups with other agency owners and such. And it was doing really, really well. The only downside was I was traveling a ton because we had clients at that point all over the world. And I love traveling. I love, going places, but it's hard when you have 2 little kids.
Yeah.
So I exited the agency. I basically handed it off to my head of business development, and basically did I treated it like an asset that still made some sort of recurring revenue for myself. And then, but without me in the picture, a year and a half into it, it just kind of fizzled out because I was doing a lot of the kind of promotional work, while I was running. But while I was doing that, when I exited it, I started a SaaS, as you mentioned, called PlanScope. And I did it, the typical agency owner who's all the software sucks, I'm going to do something new. And I really wanted to focus on project management for consulting. So, software that actually understood budget usage and could show your clients, here's what you're spending money on and here's what you're getting, instead of separating, you got your Trello or something and then they randomly get a massive invoice from you and they don't know how to correlate the two. I wanted to find a way to make it so the two related. So I started PlanScope, and with any starting a SaaS, it's just slow growth, right? It just took a long time to grow, but it grew pretty well. And what ended up happening though was a lot of my customers would email me or go through the support channels, and they wouldn't write in saying hey, I don't know how to do this, or the software sucks, it's buggy, or it wasn't that. It was a lot of things hey, do you have any advice on how I could close more deals with clients, or do you have any advice on pricing? And I would get on all these random Skype calls, and then over time I was talking to a friend of mine, Amy Hoy, who I took her course 30 by 500 about 5 years ago, and it was really pivotal for me.
What a great course, right?
Yeah. And I was talking with her, and she's like, you keep talking with people, your PlanScope customers, about pricing, just write a book on it. I was like, I don't write books, I'm an engineer. I don't do that. But I did it. And so I wrote Double Your Freelancing Rate, which then was a book. And then that was 4.5 years ago exactly. And from then on, it's just I started just, at that point I was creating content about freelancing to serve as lead gen for PlanScope. But then mid last year, I got to the point where I was trying to run this, healthy but not huge SaaS, and now I had this 7-figure training business on my hands.
Yeah.
Like I can't run both, so I went through a broker and sold PlanScope at the beginning of this year.
Wow, what an incredible story. I love when you talk about how you dug in and just tried to find out everything you could about how to keep the 100K a month, coming in for your own agency, and you have a business coach, you're reading the books, you're talking to other agency owners. It just gives you this wealth of knowledge that then became how to double your freelance rates. I want to dig into that, what that knowledge actually contains, what it is, because there's a lot of people watching this show that they're either individual solopreneur marketing freelancers, or they're running a small marketing agency, or some of the people watching are even running large marketing agencies. So the first question I have is this, kind of a negative spin on it. What's the one thing that every freelancer screws up with? Like, if you could just name it, what is it?
So I think the biggest thing is people think that the reason people pay them lots and lots of money is because they like clients like code or like designs or something like that, and they focus a little too much on the medium. So they're kind of overly focused on you talk to developers and they're talking about test-driven development and object-oriented programming and all this stuff, where to a lot of clients, especially non-technical clients, that doesn't mean anything. It's kind of like listing off a bunch of features but not telling the benefits.
Yeah.
So I just see a lot of freelancers who just are so myopically focused on the work product they do instead of how it's actually benefiting their client's business. And they don't, what they end up doing is they're basically pitching clients on, hey, I can write code for you at this much an hour, take it or leave it. And then the client says, well, I went to this Upwork website and there's these guys in Pakistan for $8 an hour who will also write code. Why should I hire you? And they don't really have an answer. So what I had to do and what we had to do with the agency was we had to figure out what do clients really want, and how can we use our skills, our craft, to get them from here to there, from where they are today to where they need to be, and focus on selling that solution. I mean, it sounds enterprising and stupid, but it's true. Like, how can we help sell solutions instead of just selling we'll swing hammers on your behalf, just pay us to swing or something.
Yeah, I love that. So, when you talk about solving, being a real solution to a real problem for them, do all problems come down to we'll make you more money, we'll save you time, or we'll build you a great brand? Like, is there any other bucket that things can fall into between time, money, and brand,
What I usually say is for any B2B transaction, it's almost always make more money or lose less money, which always end up being more profitable. At the end of the day. Like, a better brand at the end of the day is really about
profit,
more money.
Yeah,
right.
Totally.
So yeah, I mean, that's one of the. I always tell the story of when I first. I mean, this was years ago. I signed up for Infusionsoft back 2.5, 3 years ago, and they had a $2,000 setup fee, and I gladly paid that to get on. I knew that this software would help my business. And then I remember that night laying in bed on my iPhone thinking, I'm not going to spend 99 cents on this dumb game, right? So that's to me that's that B2B to B2C
transition
switching hats, right? So I was thinking as a business owner there and a consumer in the at night. But I think that's the big thing is that if you can help a business, if you can realize that businesses want to look at you as an investment rather than a cost or an expense, and really sell hey, how can I understand, if you're doing say you're a designer and somebody hires you to redesign their online store, that's like saying hey, the design now they don't like, and why is just redesigning it? What about a redesign implicitly means they're actually gonna fix the problem at hand? And that's where systems like Jobs to be Done, which are all about the idea of the switch, why are they firing their old website? Why are they firing their old way of doing things? Let's say they're using Excel now and they're hiring you to build them some custom software. Why are they firing Excel? And what is the job description that they need the new thing you're doing for them to do? And when you focus on that and you really just focus on what is the business problem at hand and how can I come in as a consultant, not only to do the technical work, but also figure out what do we need to do? I mean, that's the big mistake I made early on. I just thought I was an order taker, and whatever the client thought they needed, I'd do. And I mean, that's usually not true.
Yeah, no, I mean that's an awesome insight. It almost seems like it's the ability to be empathetic, to actually put yourself in their shoes, to think as a business owner, what am I thinking about? What am I worrying about? What am I excited about? What do I need to happen? What jobs do I need done? What jobs am I going to fire? And so if you can be empathetic as a freelancer, as a small agency, whatever, then you can, craft things into the words they need to hear. You can give them solutions that actually solve real pains. You can speak their language, right? So that's kind of it. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, one of the side benefits of it all is you're able to charge more and you have a higher closing rate because you're lower risk, right? So the more risk somebody is, just because if I needed so right now I'm working on building some custom courseware for some of my stuff. If I just hire an off-the-shelf WordPress developer, there's nothing about hiring that person that means I'm going to get the courseware that's going to make my students more successful. Whereas if I talk to somebody who's I'm going to go and I'm going to dig in and figure out where are students getting tripped up now, where are they getting lost, how can we make it so if you have more successful students, better word of mouth, more referrals, better testimonials, all that sort of stuff. How can I help you build more intuitive, more courseware that actually makes people more successful? So if somebody came to me with that attitude, I'd pay them more. It's when I did my video course, I got pitched by a local videographer. I think it was $1,500 to film and edit a 5-hour video course. And then one of my customers actually came to me and used my exact proposal template, used all my stuff, and he pitched me at $22,000. But what he said is, I'm not just going to film and edit because anyone can do that. I'm going to tell you, when I'm filming you, if you're saying stuff and you're confusing me and you're going kind of on a tangent or something and I don't get what you're, I'm going to direct it in a way. I'm not just going to film. So he went from being this commodity video editing service to I'm going to help make this video course super successful. I know film, I know video, I know all that sort of stuff. Your subject matter. Let's get together and let's make something that your customers are going to love. And that I gladly paid him 20 times more than.
Wow. It almost seems like it takes the relationship to a different place. Instead of it being a freelancer and a client, it becomes a partnership. If people feel like they're in it with you to win it, then you're going to pay them more, you're going to trust them more, you're going to like them more. You're really in it together.
Yeah, because the chances that I'm going to get the result I need are so much higher.
Yeah, and, absolutely.
Just by fact that they're focused on that, that they're one of the things I do when I don't consult much anymore, but when I do, I always tell my clients that if they come to me with a new, you see this all the time, they have a great idea or, they were in the shower this morning and they thought of something, right? I need to have permission to say, okay, if you do this, you need to basically make the case for it. How is it going to, we know the end goal. The end goal is, a minimum 10% lift in online sales or something, right? That's the goal. How is this new thing going to get us there faster or more economically? If they can make a case for that, sure, let's do it. But when you're always focused on that outcome instead of the scope or the feature set or whatever you're going to be doing, you're just more guaranteed to actually have a successful project.
Yeah, I like that. And so that's kind of the high level, being empathetic, seeing things from their point of view. Now, tell me some of the nitty gritty. Let's say they already have that. They already think from the other person's point of view. What are some of the ways they can actually double their rates? Is it just a matter of charging more? Is it a matter of having larger projects? What do they actually do now? You know what I mean?
Yeah. So I have a little kind of a framework that I tend to use, and that is I went to school for the classics, and I studied a lot of Plato and Aristotle and Greeks.
Same here.
Okay, cool. So if you've read Platonic dialogues, you know about Socratic questioning, right?
Yeah,
so
I use it with my children all the time.
Yeah, Socrates is chilling in Athens, and he goes to somebody with these assumptions, and he uses their own words against them in a way by asking the right questions that get to where he needs them to be, right? So what I do is when somebody comes to me and says, for instance, so actually I have a client I'm working with now who's an agency and they need to generate more leads. But what they came to me first was, hey, we hear you do a lot with marketing automation stuff. Can you work with us? So I didn't just jump into what I historically would have done, which is awesome, let's talk about what we're going to do technically. Let's get into details. Instead, I would say what actually made you wake up today and reach out to me? What happened? Was it an actual event? Was it a culmination of events? And I ask these questions that get them back to tell me outright what problem do they have that they need to solve. And then I try to dig in, and this is usually we all hate it when people come to us with non-disclosure agreements, but this is where I bring out my NDA and I'm I need to ask you some details about like how this business problem is impacting you financially. And they don't always know this data like off the top of their head, but I want to get a feel for like how is it actually impacting them financially. And the reason I want to know this is I tell them outright, like, if I'm not going to deliver an ROI and I don't think I can, I don't want to work with you. Like, I don't want to have clients who pay me but don't get a return. So I need to know what's at stake. And then I ask them, like, tell me a bit about what tomorrow looks like. And then what I'll do is I'll get into what I call just quantifying the financial upside of the project, which is how, like, I would ask, so for this client, I asked them what's the average LTV, lifetime value of a client of theirs. And it was like 50,000 or something is like the average LTV. And then I asked them, so all things being equal, let's say you have 10 leads this month, how many of them are you going to close? And I think for them it was like 2 or something, right? So they basically, that, I mean, to me, that's just back of the napkin math that says a lead is what, $10,000, you know, value. And then my focus is now, how can I get them new leads at $10,000 a pop? I don't care about like anything else. That's my goal. New quality leads, obviously. So then when I actually get to the point of issuing a proposal, I'm not doing the usual thing of like, I'm going to do this, 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 this. Here's what it's going to cost, blah, 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 blah. Instead, I just basically write them a sales letter for one. And I say, here's the problem at hand. Here's how it's impacting you financially. So the first number they're seeing is kind of what their potential is, right? So like at 10,000 a pop, which I'm throwing their language back at them. It's stuff we already discussed. So by the time I get to my pricing, I anchor my costs against the upside. And I mean, anyone who knows anything about price anchoring knows, like, you know, how do you make an $800 watch look cheap? You put it up against an $8,000 watch, right? Same sort of thing at work. And what I'm able to do is I'm able to say, I'm really able to frame it as an investment. So like, here's a realistic path to making a $100,000+ payoff within 6 months. Congrats, it's only going to cost you $30,000. I mean, I obviously don't write it like that. But, I mean, that's basically it in a nutshell. And what I'm doing is I'm not trying to say like quantify the market rate of what I'm doing. Because I mean, the last project I did took 2 weeks and it was a $50,000 budget. So basically $25,000 a week. But what I was doing for them was a little JavaScript, a small amount of design. By design, I mean just CSS stuff, some writing, and then wiring it up together in a tool like Drip. And it wasn't like, they were never like, oh, that's not the market rate of JavaScript developers or copywriters or anything like that was never even on the
table. You didn't position yourself that way.
Yeah, because I wasn't selling copywriting or coding. That I was selling a solution to the problem that they had that we talked about, we discussed. And that's the sort of thing where they're gladly wanting to pay that. And you know, my clients historically do get a very good ROI because the focus isn't on like, I'm just going to wire up some code for you or something. Instead, it's focused on, here's where you need to be. Let's work backwards and figure out how we get there together.
The idea that's come to our mind is this idea of deferring the sale. And you know, I think about like what you're doing. You're not just getting on the phone and trying to close it because they're interested. You're trying to learn enough to actually be able to close it when you're ready to write your proposal. I also think about software development, how we do customer development. Instead of trying to just get the sale, we have to learn a lot of data from the market, then use that data to then sell back to them. And it's this idea like delayed gratification, deferring the sale, this process to really learn before you make your move. And then when you make a move, you have so much more leverage and so much more power. Does that seem right?
It does. And one of the other things that I do, which I didn't mention yet, but one thing that's really helped my agency, my consulting business, and my students now is this idea that the jump from no commercial relationship to like a $50,000 budget is pretty steep. So what I end up doing is I sell something called a road mapping engagement, which is a small, like it could be a 1-hour session, it could be a 1-day session, where basically what you're using that for is a way to really dig into the problem holistically and figure out a plan of action, a roadmap, and use that as a small one-off paid engagement so that if they can go from no money spent on you ever to, let's say, 1,000 to then 50,000, it's a much easier jump because going from 0 to 1,000 for a business isn't that big of a deal typically. But going from 0 to 50 can often end with like a lot of feet dragging and all that sort of stuff. So if you can get them in there, deliver an early ROI, it's basically like the consulting equivalent of a tripwire, if you think about it. So it's basically help them, give them something of value with something that isn't a huge risk, both in time or money for them. Because there's also, I mean, if they hire you for a big engagement, I mean, it's more than the budget. It's they're committing to it. They're putting reputation on the line internally, potentially. And there's a lot at stake. So there needs to be a lot of trust developed to get there. So by doing it this way, you're able to then have something up front that they can potentially even swipe their Amex to pay for. You don't even need a contract or anything. And I've seen a lot of, like, Joanna Weeb used to do this a lot, where she would do these website teardowns before she'd ever work with you. So you go and you pay her like $800 to basically produce a report about like a sales page of yours or something like that. And then that would be kind of the first step before, and then she could upsell you on, hey, why don't you let me like redo your whole thing? So.
No, I like that idea. I like the tripwire for freelancers, and I think it's a good idea. So let's shift gears a little bit. Let's talk about PlanScope. So you built the software, like we already said, you sold it, because you weren't really able, it began, you were creating content for top of funnel for PlanScope, and then it became the top of funnel content was actually making the money, which is a good thing. And so what did you learn? I'm interested in what you learned about growing a SaaS product. What is different about growing a SaaS product as opposed to growing a book or a course or something like that? Do the same things apply as marketing, or does it take two different styles, approaches, methods to grow each of them? What's your thoughts on that?
So I learned a few things. One of the most interesting things was I really tried to make, by the end, PlanScope have an educational element in it, if that makes sense. So instead of just saying, here's a tool, here's your pickaxe, go learn how to like mine gold, right? Instead, I would try to incorporate into the tool more things on how can the tool not only, for instance, help manage projects, but also help manage them better by making the user better at managing projects, right? Because usually there's a disconnect. Say you have Trello, right? There's nothing that's teaching you how to be a better task manager, implicit within Trello itself, right? So I tried doing that, but the other big things that I learned was, with PlanScope specifically, so pricing started at $24 a month, which doesn't seem like a lot. I mean, that was the freelancer tier. But it was easier for me to sell a $200 course than it would be a $24 a month subscription, because people generally don't like commitments, I think. They don't like, being stuck knowing it's $24 a month, even though they realize, like, getting to, it would take, 10 months or something, or whatever that would be, right, to spend. Because people like, what people like is they like that immediate, like, pay money, get results right away. And that's what, like, tools like Barometrics comes to mind as a great example, where you basically literally get the value you need immediately when signing up. Whereas with a project management tool, the feedback loop is big. I mean, you're not going to know if this tool is actually helping for a while. And that's really hard. And I think a lot of people discount that when starting a software product. They don't really think like, is this going to be a tool? Like, that's what I love about like these analytics tools. You could just basically, get it in and bam, like there it is.
Yeah.
Or you have like the problem with like any project management tool or Mixpanel or Kissmetrics, one of these tools where, great, you signed up. Now go do like implement all this code on your site, and then like come back and we might have some data for you like in a while. So you can actually start figuring out like what to do with like your funnels and stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
So that was one thing, is that I realized I was in the feedback loop was a lot bigger, which meant selling, I think, was a lot harder. Like getting people to really commit and stick around and so on.
Did you find any ways to sell it that worked the best, or was just everything was kind of a struggle with it?
I mean, I think the big thing was I did a lot of so I had an email, this is my first foray into email courses, but I did an email course about project management. And what I did is I basically talked about, kind of at a high level, how you should manage projects. And it wasn't specific about using software. It's just about communication and, how do you deliver updates to clients and so on. And at the end of it, I basically said, I baked all of this theory into this tool. So, because I think otherwise, you Google project management software, there's a billion options.
Sure.
And they all, it's this race to the bottom with like how many features you have, right? Instead, I said, look, we're going to try to be opinionated, and I'm teaching you about how to manage projects this way. If you don't follow this framework, don't use this tool. But if this resonates with you and you're running into a lot of the problems that this email course addresses and you're nodding your head in agreement, then this tool is for you. So what it ended up doing was it actually allowed us to be very hyper focused on. It wasn't just about demographic alignment. It was about you need to buy into like our philosophy in order to use the tool.
Yeah.
Which I think worked because it made the customers much more open to us as being more than just like frontline support. Instead, and that's what I meant by like baking in that education bit into it, where we really try to make the tool the like implementation of a lot of the content they were reading by us.
Yeah, I'm literally going to use that in some of my products. I like that so much. Having the email course that ends with like, does this resonate with you? Because if so, we kind of crafted something perfect for you. I really like that angle because it's, you've already found them. If they're reading that last line, they should buy the software. If they didn't make it through the course, they'll never get to the part where you try to sell them. I like that a lot. You've also been doing a lot with email automation, email customization, drips. I believe you're with lead pages helping them, if I'm not mistaken.
I'm kind of like
drip.
a formal advisor for them in Drip now, who they own.
Yeah, which is awesome. And so I'm sure you're just learning a ton about, those kinds of things. So what is it you're learning right now? What are some knowledge you can drop on us with email, drips, customization, automation, any of that stuff?
Yeah, so the big thing that I've been doing, and it's been really working well, is really making it so the content people see either on my website or in emails is specifically crafted for them and what they do. So for instance, like when you join my email course, which is where most people join my list, I ask email and what kind of work you do. So developer, design, writer, marketer, whatever. And depending on what you do, everything will then change. And I passively survey people throughout I don't give them a big upfront survey. Instead, I kind of like hit them with these little pop-up things like, hey, are you solo or work with a team? And they just tap solo, or if they tap team or whatever. Then, like, depending on what they choose, I then start to personalize or tailor the other survey questions over time about that. And what's cool is, so if you go to my Double Your Freelancing Rate product now, and you're a solo designer, you're going to get different copy and testimonials and everything else than if you were a team developer. So it's common knowledge, but everyone says like, to go niche, right? But I think people think like the product itself needs to be super, super niche. But if you can make the marketing super niche, you basically get the same effect, right?
I love that. I don't know if people like are fully tracking how big what you just said is, but I think it's really big, right? Because you're right. Everybody says go niche, right? But they don't mean product. They mean making the customer feel like it was made just for them, even if it can do more than they use it to do. Even if it is, also works for other verticals and other industries, if they feel like, oh, Brennan knows me, he's using my language to talk about this product, he's displaying the features in a way that really resonate with me, even though it also would work for somebody else, as long as you're connecting with me through the marketing, it's okay that the product isn't that niche. I love that.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting I found is, so since I track everything, I actually ran this report yesterday, and developers spend 5 times as much on my stuff as designers, but I have more designers on my list.
Okay.
And the reason for that is I'm historically a developer myself, so a lot of like the examples I would give in the way I'd write would be very developer-y. So it's just a matter of like, now I'm going through, and I've only done this on the marketing, but the next step is within the course itself, since it's self-hosted on my site, I can go in and I can tailor like in the course itself, the examples I give can be like, if you're a designer, you're going to get all like examples, like when I give you a, for example, blah, 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 that are about design, which allows me to, there's a few benefits. First off, there's a pecking order of like, I have designers, developers, and then like I asked, like I've got VAs, I've got audio engineers, but they're kind of like small related to everyone else. So I can prioritize it based off of volume, like who do I know about? And I just started rolling this out a few weeks back, and it's already been like, just doing stuff as stupid as like changing it. So if you're a designer, this is my assumption, but if you're a designer and you see a bunch of testimonials from like iOS engineers, you're probably going to think like, this isn't for me, even though it is for you. Yeah. Whereas if you're a designer and you see other designers talking about how they've succeeded from it, that's huge. And that's
I think you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Well, what software are you using to change? Are you using like Optimizely to change out copy? Or what are you doing? Or is this custom?
Yeah, it's all custom. I'm an engineer by training. So what I did is I store all this data in Drip. So your subscriber data, like when you're on my site, I track everything you do. I know like what you read most, and then I can make it so like if you tend to read a lot of articles on pricing, but you haven't bought my course on pricing, you'll then start getting emails from me about why you should buy my course.
I gotcha. And you're storing that data initially when they say, I'm a designer, I'm a developer, I'm a writer, that's when you're storing it initially, and then it's changing their experience throughout your universe.
Exactly. And as I collect more data, it just refines it even better.
Yeah, it's brilliant.
So what I'm able to do then is, I have all this within Drip, and then, as they move through my site, and the benefit there is I can then tailor the emails they get too. So it's not just like the on-site personalization, it's also the email personalization. And I'm able to do all this. And it's how I'm doing it technically is I just wrote some custom JavaScript that basically says, like, when Drip comes back with its payload data of, like, here's a subscriber and their custom fields and their tags, I just have a bunch of, like, conditionals. Like, okay, for the headline tag, and I can share with you the code if you want later, but, like, for the headline tag, the H1, if they're a developer, return this text. If they're a designer, it just a switch statement. Right? So, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Very cool. Well, this has been an amazing interview. I mean, it's just chock full of insights and tactics and takeaways. I have two last questions. It's how I end every interview. They're kind of silly questions. The first one is, what are you working on as soon as this interview is over? And it can be you're doing dishes, you're walking the dog, you're closing $1 million deal, whatever it really is you're doing when you hit the stop button. What is it?
So in 24 minutes, I have I have a new course called the Double Freelancing Academy. It's very high touch. It's kind of like an immersive 7-month thing. And I phone in or I Skype interview everyone who applies. So I have an interview, and so we'll see. Oh,
very cool. It's like one-on-one. They get time with you.
Yeah, it's like a 15-minute call. It's just really a mutual vetting.
Yeah.
Make sure it's right for them. Make sure it's right for us. And so
that's awesome. All right, and then the last question is, what is the best advice you have for any startup that's trying to grow? And it could be something you've already said or something new.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing is just because I worked with a lot of freelancers specifically when I start like a SaaS or something on the side, the thing that I've seen work really well is when you can have so I have a friend who's doing an analytics startup where they're basically tapping into Google Analytics and helping you like figure out like trends and such. What though, it's hard to grow at like $20 a month or whatever he's charging. What I told him to do, I think he's doing it, is he's doing like this higher touch offering where he can basically sell consulting clients on like him owning their analytics growth. Like, he'll be in charge of helping them increase whatever KPIs they care about, like traffic or sales or whatever else. But he's using his SaaS as like, he's dogfooding his SaaS with his clients. So now he's able to like basically add, he's getting them all on retainers for like $1,000+ a month. So he's like adding 1,000 MRR every time he adds a new consulting client. But he's able to start slowly moving all the stuff he's doing individually, like on a one-off basis, into the software he's building. So eventually he's starting to, in a way, delegate more to the software.
Yeah.
And it's going to make it so the software is more tailored to the actual needs people have, like his clients.
Yeah.
And he can also sell that independently, and he can then upsell the consulting through the software.
No, that's awesome. I want to call that extreme dog fooding.
Yeah.
That's great.
It's what Patrick McKenzie coined it as software as a service as a service.
There you go. Yeah. That's somebody else people should look up if they haven't read his stuff or listened to his stuff. Yeah. He has a very unique take on everything.
Yes, yeah.
That's awesome. Well, Brennan, thank you so much for coming on Growth Hacker TV. It's been an excellent episode.
Awesome. Thanks, Bronson.